warning arrived before the ships. A fisherman had seen something far out at sea. Nobody knew if it was true. Nobody knew how many vessels had been spotted. Nobody even knew if the shapes on the horizon were Viking ships at all. Yet by nightfall, nobody felt safe. Along the coasts of medieval Europe, fear often arrived long before the raiders themselves. That was what made the Viking Age different. The attack was terrifying, but the waiting could be worse. Imagine standing beside a cold shoreline as darkness settles over the water. The sea looks calm, no sails are visible, no warriors are landing on the beach. Everything appears normal, yet nobody relaxes. Families bring animals closer to home. Monks watch the horizon from church windows. Guards stay awake longer than usual. Conversations become quieter. Everyone is listening, everyone is watching. Because if the rumors are true, tomorrow could change everything. For centuries, coastal communities lived with this uncertainty. The sea connected trade routes, fishing grounds, and distant kingdoms. But it also carried danger. An empty horizon in the evening could become a horizon filled with sails by sunrise. And once those sails appeared, options became limited. The Vikings understood something powerful. Uncertainty creates fear. When people know where danger is, they can prepare for it. When they do not know when danger will arrive, every day becomes stressful. Every storm becomes suspicious. Every distant ship becomes a threat. Every patch of fog feels different. Meanwhile, far away in Scandinavia, preparations were already underway. Axes were sharpened beside firelight. Ships were repaired after long winters. Supplies were carried toward the shore. Crews gathered around leaders and discussed routes, weather, and opportunities waiting beyond the sea. No battle had started. No raid had begun. Yet events were already moving toward an outcome nobody could predict. The people waiting on the coast did not know it. The men preparing to sail did not know it. But both sides were already part of the same story. Because every Viking raid began long before the first warrior stepped onto foreign soil, it began with anticipation. And anticipation has frightened human beings for thousands of years. For the men aboard the ships, the journey could be as dangerous as the raid itself. Modern people often imagine Viking voyages as confident marches toward easy victories. Reality was much harsher. Once the shoreline disappeared behind them, there were no guarantees. The North Sea could become a nightmare without warning. Cold rain battered crews for days. Powerful winds pushed ships away from their intended course. Towering waves crashed against wooden hulls while darkness swallowed the horizon. A single storm could destroy months of preparation. A single mistake could leave a crew stranded far from home. The ocean did not care about courage. It did not care about experience. It did not care about ambition. Many ships never returned. The sea kept their stories forever. Yet despite those dangers, the voyages continued. Generation after generation, year after year, because the ocean offered something that life at home often could not. Opportunity. Across the water lay wealthy monasteries, trading centers, farmland, silver, and possibilities that seemed impossible to ignore. And while Viking crews crossed dangerous seas, something else was happening hundreds of miles away. Stories were spreading. A monastery attacked, a village looted, a settlement destroyed before help could arrive. Each story traveled from traveler to traveler, from merchant to merchant, from church to church, and every retelling made the next raid feel larger, more frightening, more unpredictable. Soon entire regions began living under the shadow of possibilities rather than realities. People worried about attacks that had not happened. They feared ships they had never seen. They imagined dangers that might never arrive. But fear does not need certainty to grow. In fact, uncertainty often makes fear stronger. Imagine waking before dawn and looking toward the sea. A dark shape appears in the distance. Maybe it is a fishing vessel, maybe it is a merchant ship, or maybe it is something else. You cannot know, and that uncertainty becomes exhausting. Day after day, week after week, year after year. Long before weapons clashed and villages burned, a different battle had already begun. A battle fought inside the minds of the people waiting along Europe's coastlines. And in that battle, the sea itself became one of the Vikings' greatest allies. But the stories told only part of the truth, because before any raid could succeed, there was something even more important than courage: timing. A Viking crew could possess strong ships, experienced warriors, and favorable weather. Yet a poorly timed landing could destroy everything. The difference between success and disaster was often measured in minutes. A coastline that seemed vulnerable during the morning could become heavily defended by afternoon. A river that offered easy access inland could become a trap if the tide changed unexpectedly. A small mistake could leave warriors stranded in hostile territory with no easy way home. That is why preparation mattered so much. Long before foreign shores appeared on the horizon, crews studied weather patterns, discussed routes, and watched the sea carefully. Sometimes they waited for days before making a move. Sometimes they remained aboard anchored ships while leaders debated whether conditions were right. Patience often decided survival. From a distance, Viking raids may have looked sudden. For the people involved, they were often the result of long periods of waiting. Imagine a row of ships floating silently offshore before sunrise. The coastline is visible through the mist. No one speaks loudly. Weapons have already been checked. Shields rest beside benches. Every man understands what may happen within the next few hours. Some stare toward land. Others focus on the water. Nobody knows exactly how the day will end. That uncertainty affected everyone. Even experienced warriors understood the risks. The popular image of fearless Vikings charging toward danger without concern misses an important reality. Every raid carried consequences: a damaged ship, an unexpected ambush, a stronger defense than anticipated. Any of these could turn confidence into catastrophe. That knowledge created tension. The final moments before a landing were often filled with silence. The sound of water against wood, the distant cry of seabirds, the weight of a weapon resting in your hands. And then eventually the order came. The ships moved forward, the waiting ended, and the unknown became reality. For the people living along the coast, the experience felt completely different. Sometimes attacks arrived without warning, but not always. Occasionally, news traveled faster than the ships themselves. A nearby settlement had been attacked. Merchants reported strange vessels moving along the coast. Travelers carried alarming rumors from neighboring regions. And suddenly, an entire community found itself trapped inside a different kind of fear. Not the fear of battle, the fear of waiting for battle. Imagine waking every morning and looking toward the sea. Nothing. The horizon is empty. By midday, nothing has changed. By evening, still nothing. But the rumors remain. The ships are somewhere. Nobody knows where. Nobody knows when they will appear. That uncertainty slowly reshaped entire communities. Children grew up hearing stories about raids before they ever witnessed one. Monasteries organized watches. Coastal settlements developed warning systems. Church bells became signals of danger. Fires appeared on hillsides to spread news quickly between neighboring settlements. People adapted because they had to. Fear became part of everyday life, and reputation became one of the Vikings' greatest advantages. After enough successful raids, many communities reacted before an attack even started. A distant sail could create panic. A false report could trigger preparations. An unfamiliar ship might send people running inland. The image of the Vikings became larger than the reality. Dark ships emerging from fog. Warriors appearing from nowhere. Villages disappearing in smoke before help could arrive. These images spread across Europe for generations. Yet behind every story stood ordinary human beings. The men aboard those ships were not creatures from legend. Most came from harsh environments where survival demanded resilience, adaptability, and risk-taking. The sea shaped them. The Norse shaped them. Opportunity drove them. But once their reputation began spreading across Europe, fear started doing part of the work for them. And fear often traveled much farther than any longship ever could. Eventually, Europe learned. Kingdoms strengthened coastal defenses. Watchtowers appeared near vulnerable shorelines. River crossings were protected. Local rulers organized faster responses to threats arriving from the sea. Communities adapted because they had no choice. The Viking Age forced them to. But even as defenses improved, something remained: the memory. Because the raids revealed a reality that many people found deeply unsettling. Safety can disappear very quickly. One peaceful evening can become chaos by dawn. One empty horizon can become a warning. One distant sail can change hundreds of lives. That lesson stayed with people long after individual raids were forgotten. And perhaps that is one reason the Viking Age continues to capture attention today. Not simply because of battles, not simply because of warriors, and not simply because of ships, but because of the atmosphere surrounding them. The tension, the uncertainty, the feeling that something might be approaching from beyond sight. For centuries, many Europeans no longer viewed the sea as only a source of trade, travel, or opportunity. The sea became unpredictable, and unpredictability has always been one of humanity's deepest fears. Even now, the imagery remains powerful. Dark sails emerging through cold northern mist, wooden ships crossing black water before sunrise, silent crews moving toward an uncertain future. The images survive because they represent something larger than a single historical period. They represent anticipation, the moment before events change, the space between rumor and reality, the uneasy feeling that danger may already be moving toward you even when you cannot yet see it. That was the hidden power behind many Viking raids. Not merely the attack itself, not merely the violence, but the ability to make entire coastlines live in expectation of what might happen next. Because long before the first village burned, the first battle began inside the human mind. And sometimes the waiting was the hardest part of all.